in the late 12th century, but it wasn't until the 16th century that a man named Sen no Rikyu really perfected the fundamentals of the tea ceremony, and you could say he created the tea ceremony as it is known today in Japan. Specifically, he summed up the tea ceremony and its spiritual foundation in these 4 words. Harmony, that is both harmony between people and harmony with nature. Respect, a showing of gratitude toward all things. Purity, and tranquility, again, both the tranquility of man as well as the tranquility of nature. And this man, Sen no Rikyu, is even today still known as kind of the father of tea ceremony. And in fact, each of his sons founded their own school of tea. Among them was the Urasenke School of Tea, founded by one of his sons, which today's guests, the Chado Urasenke Tankokai Washington, D.C. Association, still practice today, all these centuries later. And they'll tell you more about that. Today we'll be watching the tea ceremony, of course, on this stage from your vantage point in the auditorium. So maybe it's not exactly what you normally would expect for a tea ceremony setting. So just briefly, I'm going to introduce you to a tea house here in Washington, D.C. to give you a better idea of what would normally be the setting for such a ceremony. This is the Embassy of Japan's tea house. It's called Ippakute. Ippakute means the tea house of 100 years. And it's called this because it was built in 1960 on the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the Japan-U.S. Treaty on Amity and Commerce. This is actually considered one of the, or often considered the greatest Japanese tea house of its kind outside of Japan. So it's really quite a nice thing that we're lucky to have here in Washington, D.C. It was actually originally built in Tokyo, dismantled, shipped here to Washington, D.C., and rebuilt. So in fact, all of the materials are originally from Japan. This photograph was taken at Ippakute, but you might see something similar at any traditional Japanese tea house. When you approach the tea house, you do so via this this stone pathway. And the reason why is it causes you to have to kind of slow down, think about your steps, and it puts you in the meditative state of mind to prepare you for the tea ceremony. So today, we're all just sitting in an auditorium watching a stage, but maybe if we can make our own little mental stone pathway, we can just take a walk down that and get in the right frame of mind for watching the tea ceremony in a moment. There may be a few seats left over here if any of you folks would like to sit down. So the Ippakute tea house actually has 2 rooms. Today I'm just going to introduce you to this, the smaller of the 2, which, although it's small, can function as its own tea house in and of itself. It's called Bukka-an, which means the tea house of dancing flowers, but also is a play on the name of President Buchanan, who was the president at the time of the treaty, which this tea house commemorates. So, one thing you'll notice in this room is the alcove with a hanging scroll in it. That is one thing to watch for as the Tankokai is performing their demonstration today. They'll explain a little bit about how that might feature into a tea ceremony. Another thing to watch for is the 4 principles we mentioned before: harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility. You'll see how those inform each aspect of the tea ceremony, so keep those in mind as we watch. What you will not see today is a nijiriguchi. This literally is the crawl-through entrance, and this is the actual formal entrance to any traditional Japanese tea house. Believe it or not, it's only 27 inches square. So you have to get down and crawl through it to get into the tea house. And the idea is no matter who you are, whether back in the day you were a samurai or today you're a CEO of Fortune 500 company or whatever, no matter who you are, you're forced to kind of bow down, humble yourself as you enter the tea house. Because once in the tea house, during the tea ceremony, everyone is equal. So although we don't have a nijiriguchi to see today, keep that in mind, and you'll be able to see that reflected in the tea ceremony that we're going to see demonstrated today. That's just a little basic background, but to show you the actual tea ceremony and what will take place at a tea ceremony, I'd like to introduce the Chado Urasenke Tankokai, Washington, D.C. Association.